Usually it carries to 300 radio stations across the country. My name's Clyde Lewis. I run a radio show called Ground Zero. Are you familiar with it? You know what's really amazing is that I have found that a lot of the time this year I've been talking about chemtrails. I've been talking about weather formations. I've been talking about weather control and how it all affects us and how the toxicity of our skies are creating something called sickness behavior. Now you can look this up. There is a terminology that people are feeling sick or they're feeling undue stress or they're feeling badly and they don't know why. And they go to their doctor and it's all idiopathic. They say it's idiopathic, they don't know what's going on. Take a pill, you'll feel much better. And I have been through this, I'm sure many of you have been through this, and we're finding ourselves in a situation where you can go back 20 years and you won't remember maybe 25 years past where every commercial on television is about either a lawsuit towards Big Pharma or drugs that will help you with things like bowel problems, lung problems, erectile dysfunction, all of these problems that we've all of a sudden became afflicted with. And you can trace back the time to the 1990s. And I know that in my experience doing my show since 1995, that it was nearer to 1998 and 1999 where we were concerned about chemtrails. At the time, it was still unknown about what they did. I remember in the 1980s, it was back in 1985, John Chancellor of NBC News did a story about contrails. And their story was how contrails were affecting the weather. Now, that story got lost somewhere, but then more things were happening in the skies and people were becoming concerned. And it started off with the idea that people were getting flus whenever chemtrails would come over or they would act differently. And so there were speculations about mind control. There were speculations about how this affected all of us. And what they're beginning to find is that the weather and the toxicity of our planet right now is creating something called pro-inflammatory cytokines. And what pro-inflammatory cytokines do is they actually create the feeling of malaise, the feeling of disease. And this has been going on now for some time. And they've had a hard time trying to pinpoint exactly what's causing it. But the big question is why these cytokines are being released in the body, but many Americans are feeling overall weariness and fatigue. One thing I think that a lot of people should know about is that there is a growing thirst for caffeinated energy drinks, which include the likes of Red Bull, Monster, and Rockstar. This has spurred a heart-thumping surge in sales. Globally, the energy drink industry has gone from $3.8 billion in 1999 to $27.5 billion business last year, according to data from market research. And that's the EcuMonitor. There's more than a 62% jump. A 62% jump in the sales of energy drinks. Now, why is that? Because people are feeling weary. They have that sick feeling. They don't know what's going on. They need energy. But Americans are the most of the consumers. Americans in the U.S. energy drink sales have grown by more than 5,000% since 1999. So is it any coincidence that in 1999 the first analysis of the chemtrails began? That's when it happened. In that year, I was first confronted with questions about aerosol testing that was carried out by planes at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. And what they were doing is they were spraying simulants in the air. And you could track these simulants. You could track these simulants by the blue that they left behind. There were blue trails, and there were white trails. Some were even black trails, and they were doing the tests over a place called Eagle Range, which was an area in the west deserts of Utah. Programs included unknown testing of biochemicals on the people of the United States. Some of these reports showed that citizens were sprayed with various chemicals resulting in dementia, miscarriages, impotence, headaches, neuralgia, herpes zoster, nausea, irritable bowel syndrome, birth defects, and low-grade fevers. By the year 2000, there was a great deal of money going into advertising of drugs that allegedly alleviated these very problems, from Prilosec to Viagra to specially modified over-the-counter medications for migraines. And these new miracle drugs were developed in the early 1980s, tested and prepared for approval, and many of these new drugs were developed allegedly to counteract the effects of an environmental accident that was caused by bioweapon open-air experimentation on the American people from the 1940s, and another that took place prior to the declassified documents were released in 1977. The Army released simulant agents over hundreds of populated areas around the country. Targets included portions of Hawaii and Alaska, San Francisco, St. Louis, Minneapolis, New York City, Washington, D.C., Key West, and many other cities. The purpose was to see how the bacteria spread and survived as people went about their normal activities. Evidence suggested that the tests may have been causing illness to exposed citizens. Nevertheless, the health of the billions of people exposed was never monitored because the Army assumed that the bacteria and the chemicals were harmless. And the tests involved spraying aerosolized stimulants from planes and helicopters, sometimes in balloons and other populated areas. They were dropping them from balloons. In fact, 45 years of open-air testing, the Army stopped using certain simulants for reasons of safety. But in each instance, the Army belatedly recognized that they could be causing disease, birth defects, and other problems. They have also been known to drop black mold as a simulant. The fungus had long been known to cause aspergillosis, and that sometimes can lead to fatal lung disorders. Similarly, in the 1960s, the Army stopped using zinc cadmium sulfide, which is a chemical that had been known for years to cause cancer. In the 1970s, the bacterium Serratia mersens caused many infections that led to death of healthy individuals. It was taken out of service as a simulant because of it, but most of the time when they would spray, they do so to see what would happen to areas. There were times when they would drop toxic chemicals on a city to see if flu or any other diseases could take place. And so there were neurotoxins being dropped from the skies, neurotoxins that were used in the open-air testing. They were known to be causing birth defects, mutilations in humans, actually mutations in humans, and animal DNA. They were seeing changes in animal DNA. They were seeing changes in humans and what was going on with them. These effects were minimal, according to the military, biological human testing and the effects of open-air testing on animals. Most of this was being done in the west deserts of Utah and in Nevada, but there were people who were telling me about how animals were affected by all of this. In 1979, a declassified review claimed that the United States intensified its development of ethnic weapons. These ethnic weapons were designed to selectively target and eliminate specific ethnic groups who were susceptible due to genetic differences and variations in DNA. And these weapons were classified under a project that was codenamed MK Naomi. MK Naomi specifically was a plan to store materials that could either incapacitate or kill the test subject and develop devices to use for the diffusion of such materials over widely populated areas. Much of the details of the operation and how the materials were dispersed is scarce. However, new programs replacing MK Naomi through the U.S. Army Special Operations Command gave evidence of at least 3 covert techniques for attacking and poisoning crops and animal products that have been examined under field conditions. One of them included the deliberate spraying of neurotoxins on crops, cows, and sheep. Helicopters were fitted with spray tanks, and later C-130s were also fitted with tanks that would spray a chemical trail over a large area. The C-130s were dispatched out of Hill Air Force Base, Utah. Modular aerial spraying systems, or MASS, M-A-S-S, were used to conduct nighttime aerial spray missions on animals and crops. Each system can be configured within up to 4 500-gallon tanks for a total volume of 2,000 gallons of spray. That's 2,000 gallons of spray. CH-130 or C-130H aircraft were modified to perform aerial application toxins. The MASS, the MASS system, was built by Lockheed Con Air. I'm not afraid to give names here because I think it's important that we know the origins. Lockheed Con Air provided the MASS systems for the spraying processes. And if you want to look for the patents, they're on the internet. If you want to look for the origination, you look at Hill Air Force Base, you can look at Dugway, you look at Tooele Army Depot. These are all areas where toxins were stored. One of the major design criteria of the MASS was that it had to be a roll-on, roll-off system. In other words, it was on pallets, so they could roll it on and roll it off. They could take a plane that was gutted out from the interior with no seats, they'd roll on the MASS, and then they'd take off the MASS. That way they could fill it, roll it on, roll it off. They would put additives in the MASS as well. I heard some pilots say they put something on in the system called, to coin a phrase, it was called panther piss. You can look into this. They were using this additive in fuel and they were dumping it on cities. No idea of what it was taking or what it was doing to people when they did this. So what they would do is they would take these pallets and they would lock it into the C-130's dual rail system. Once the MASS was loaded, interconnecting plumbing and electrical circuits tie the MASS modules together. To contain any spillage of spray materials, a 15-lip drip pan surrounded the pallets. The dry weight of the MASS was 10,500 pounds. So there was actually waste that was left behind that went into pallets and went into dishes, basically pans underneath the pallets. Now what people don't know is that the MASS system was allegedly used to release smart virulence over Iraq during the Gulf War. They're called smart virulence. Modification, basically, were modifications of strains of brucellosis, and they were made in order to spread it into enemy troops. But it would actually pass on to other populations. They knew how it spread. They monitored the spreading during the Gulf War. The modifying of diseases is what they were putting out, modified diseases. And so the modifying of these diseases created a disabling bacterium that disappeared after the infection. Troops could be infected yet exhibited no signs of the bacteria when examined by a doctor. Bioengineers created a stealthy weapon. They extracted the active agent of brucellosis from the brucellosis bacteria, although the active agent in the mycoplasma would still be there. The bacteria have been discarded and your blood tests will be negative even though you were infected with brucellosis mycoplasma. They'd go in and they'd say, we can't find anything wrong with you. But why am I tired, Doc? Who knows? Well, I was in the Gulf War. Well, it's Gulf War syndrome. Well, I wasn't in the Gulf War. It's Epstein-Barr. I have fibromyalgia. All these things started to develop in the 1990s. And all were part parcel due to the testing on the American people with the use of aerosols and simulant variations of these aerosols. They weren't considered lethal by the standard of the military. But the standards of lethality or the lethal nature of any kind of spraying is based on maybe 1 per 100,000 people. So that means if one death happens from 100,000, they have plausible deniability and they can say, well, it could have been part of our testing program, but we don't know for sure. And besides, we were doing this for the benefit of national security, so why do you bitch about it? Same thing they said to the downwinders when they were testing nuclear weapons in Nevada. My family were downwinders, and that's why I have something called tuberous sclerosis, which is a genetic disorder. It affects my skin, okay? And everybody, they judge you by how you look. Sometimes my skin doesn't look all that pretty. It's because of my genetic disorder. Also, it makes you more prone to cancer and tumor growth. So when you're looking at these clandestine tests, they were conducted by the CIA. They were closely monitored by the National Institute of Health and the CDC. They were encouraged by what was seen in the skies. Look at what it's doing to people. Okay, let's do a 1-800-GOT-FLU-2 number so you can call and find out where it's affecting people. Does anybody remember the 1-800-GOT-FLU? That was something that was on billboards all over the country because you were calling 1-800-GOT-FLU and they were monitoring everybody who was getting these flu symptoms, but they couldn't find out what was really wrong with themselves, so they were just monitoring it. And that's where Tamiflu came from, by the way. Tamiflu was created to combat the symptoms of contrail toxin sickness. The timing, you notice the timing, it's working, right? That's the timing of all this. So, the U.S. government passed this newly modified brucellosis strain, and they used it on Iranian troops. They used it on Iraqi troops. They gave it to Saddam Hussein. They sold it to Saddam Hussein. And they wanted to use it against Iran. In 1986, with the approval of Vice President George Bush, Saddam received shipments of Brucella abortus biotypes 3 and 9, and Brucella melitensis biotypes 1 and 3. This is all recorded, and you can chart the weapons of mass destruction, bioweapons that they sold to Saddam Hussein. We were good friends with him at the time. Saddam Hussein became our enemy during the Gulf War of 1991. He used this pathogen on American troops, resulting in an illness referred to as Gulf War syndrome. This causes chronic fatigue, loss of appetite, profuse sweating, joint and muscle pain, insomnia, nausea, and damage to major organs. Sounds similar to something we call Epstein-Barr. It's also some of the symptoms remain in people with fibromyalgia. One of my wives I married a long time ago had fibromyalgia. It was hard to deal with it. Every day was chronic pain. Every day was needing pain medications. Every day was needing something. And it led to depression. Once again, the pro-inflammatory cytokines cause depression. They just realized that pro-inflammatory cytokines cause depression, lack of vitamin D causes depression. Most people in the United States right now are depressed. Most people are undiagnosed depressives. Okay? They haven't been diagnosed, but they know that something's wrong. They just can't put their finger on what's wrong with them. Now, you can pop a couple pills to see if that helps you, but what really helps you is knowing the nutritional value of what you're eating, and most of that is also being affected by the toxicity of the trails. Percolate is being found in foods in California, mostly greens, vegetables, and also they're now taking the orange crop and they're using fracked water to basically fill the oranges. So when you're eating oranges, you're eating petroleum products. This is what they're doing, just to see how we react to it. If there's no reaction or no mass death, they say it's okay. But what it's doing is things like glyphosate, Roundup, putting that in the body. It might cause cancer. But what it is that Monsanto, they hire scientists to basically sign off on science that they've created themselves. They pay off scientists to say, okay, I've got my clipboard and my white lab coat, and I'm going to sign off on this for you. And they do it. There was a lawsuit that was recently raised against Monsanto for doing that very thing. How many times have we seen the same thing probably with climate change or global warming? They write the science, scientists sign off on it, the science is in, the agenda is made, you don't question it. Geoengineering, put that out of your mind, it's not happening, but yet Harvard, Raytheon, and everyone else is getting ready to do these so-called trail studies, and they're going to put them in the skies. They've already put them in the skies. They're just normalizing it for us because they went out and they said it was all a hoax. And after they declared it all a hoax, then they decided, well, we're going to do it, and that way we can give it a confirmation. If Harvard or the CIA or NOAA or NASA is behind it, it's got to be good for you. It's got to be great. It's all for science. But see, science is all political now, if you quote Bill Nye the Science Dupe. Bill Nye the Science Lie. It's all political. It's all political. Yeah, you know what? You know scores that they want to give you with the new Trump program. They're basically making it harder for you to get a job, and you'll be replaced by a robot. So check your telomeres, check your DNA, and check your vaccines. They want us all drugged, they want us all sick so we can put more money in the coffers of Big Pharma. They're getting kids hooked on OxyContin at 11 years old. They're giving kids OxyContin at 11 years old. And yet they won't allow a child to take CBD marijuana, which is harmless. It's not like you're smoking it. You're taking it and making the body feel better. It takes care of pain. It's a Schedule I drug, by the way. And they say that OxyContin is not dangerous, yet they tell us, oh, we have this huge problem with opioid addiction and opioid abuse. It goes beyond opioids. It goes beyond just popping a couple Percocet. It's going out to your heroin dealer and taking some black tar and killing yourself. It's part of the culling process. It's all about toxicity. So when it comes to laying the trails down for the troops, which they did in the 1990s, in the War of 1991, troops initially were told that no such infection existed. Gulf War syndrome, it's BS. It's not real. It's psychological. Fibromyalgia, psychological. Morgellons, psychological. You're making it up. It's not real. What are these little crawly things in my arm? Oh, it's nothing. It's just lint. That's what they do. Slowly, over the years, authorities were forced to admit that something had triggered severe illness in many Gulf War veterans. By then, a variant of the modified brucellosis had spread to civilian population. This is where we get Epstein-Barr. People began suffering from general debilitation, tiredness. When it became known that the contagion was spreading into the general population, top officials with the National Institute of Health and Center for Disease Control, as well as the Defense Department, and the Department of Health and Human Resources began a program of misrepresentation of the disease to mask their role in its origin. That's where they came up with Epstein-Barr. This is just another disease, guys. Don't worry about it. We had nothing to do with it. The Defense Department had nothing to do with it. Your chemtrails had nothing to do with it. Please, don't look up. Please, don't make up stories. Chronic fatigue syndrome, another one. Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. Top-level officials concerned with both the spread of the contagion and with the risk of their role in its origin would become publicly known to actually move to counteract the pathogen. Once again, modifications of the pathogen were synthesized in order to reverse the damage that had been done. A newly synthesized cure was developed, and a patent was issued in 1996 for an aerosol vaccination process, which would permit the vaccination of wildlife and domestic herds by spraying them or birds from the air. The bio company Maxigen was given $6.7 million in grant money from DARPA for the development of an aerosolized vaccine consisting of an antibiological agent containing pretease subtilsin, an enzyme commonly found in laundry detergent. I remember the spraying of this chemical. They said it was like laundry detergent. It broke up biobacterial entities in ultraviolet light. This was a test that they were doing as well because of the way people were sick, and some of those trails were actually inoculation trails, and it failed. It had a reversed effect. It made things worse. In fact, they force multiplied cow blood, of all things. They would use cow plasma to force multiply this bacterial agent they were laying in the skies, and it failed. People are still sick. People got worse. So the aerosol vaccination worked. It was $6.7 million that was basically lost in trying to find a cure for this. So it broke down bacteria's cellular walls. It caused bacteria to literally explode into harmless masses, but it had to go somewhere. Other components of the mixture actually has barium and aluminum. Barium and aluminum mutate to change germs in ultraviolet light, and it can also be used to reflect light away from the Earth, causing a cooling effect. This was already documented in the 1990s. So the cooling effect and the effect of the weather, in fact, as I said, John Chancellor did a story in NBC News in 1980s talking about how the National Weather Service and NASA were monitoring contrails. This is before the word chemtrail was even invented. They were monitoring lingering contrails to see if the cirrus formations were causing weather patterns to shift and change. Their data was released saying yes, but then all of a sudden it miraculously disappeared. No one knew. And so conspiracy theorists started talking about it in the late 1990s. And that's what they were doing. They were basically leaving it to those who were outside the realm of the mainstream narrative to tell the story, and believe me, they did, with shows like Coast to Coast AM, My Show, and Sightings by Jeff Rentz. The word was getting around. In 2003, a report was filed by Tektronix Limited regarding the creation of aluminum nanopowder using DC atmospheric plasma technology for upper atmospheric dispersal. The work was funded under a contract from Quintiq, formerly the United Kingdom Defence and Evaluation Research Agency. Quintiq is also a former partner of the Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group is the principal contractor for the military-industrial complex and the defense contractor for the multifaceted atmospheric plasma program, or Operation Cloverleaf. I'm giving you these names and these ways to research so you can go home and see how it's all put together. I figured it was good for you to get a background and get an idea of how it's all going on, so if anybody ever asks you, prove your point, you can say Operation Cloverleaf, MK Naomi, the toxin spraying during the Gulf War, fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue. All those things are product of the experimentation of toxins being dropped not only on enemy soldiers, but our own soldiers. And then them coming back from the war, having sex with their wives or their girlfriends, babies being born with this toxicity, because it carries. Everything carries when you're spreading your DNA. So we have a whole group of children, a whole group of people that are becoming passive, tired, erectile dysfunction at the age of 29. I found that out from a doctor. I said to him, I said, ED, what's the story? He said, it's amazing. We have men who are getting ED at 29. We have girls that are menstruating at 8 years old. Now, what is that being caused from? Operation Cloverleaf has been a modified atmospheric experimental program that has existed since the first Gulf War, which includes and is not limited to weather modification, military communications, space weapons development, ozone and global warming research, plus biological weaponry and aerial detection testing that uses aerosolized powders and modified agents that perform a multitude of tasks. How many people have heard of chaff? Chaff is basically metallic agents that are dropped in a chemtrail in order to evade radar. They drop it out of the airport sometimes. They drop it everywhere. And it's to basically block planes and other things if they're traveling, just so people don't see them. So whenever they drop chaff, you can bet that there's a military exercise going on. So it's important that you know that there are metallic things they put in the sky that you inhale that they also use to basically deflect radar. The contracts surrounding Cloverleaf have been overseen by the Carlyle Group. Carlyle is also working with several other branches of the government that are conducting geoengineering and biological experimentation. This was done before Harvard announced that they were going to do the geosolar program. Carlyle Group has already been one of the groups, along with Raytheon, that have been doing tests on the American people since the Gulf War. The multi-organizational megalith, which are perpetrating a lot of these biochemical projects, and I'll give you the names again. The U.S. Department of Defense, DARPA, Department of Energy. They have a huge network of national labs and universities, private defense contractors, and people get dependent on them. They may have had a touch of IBS or something. They take it, the IBS gets worse. It develops into things like rectal cancer, intestinal cancers. These are things that you need to be aware of. This is all one big cycle of toxicity for all of us. There are also cooperating governments of other nations and probably some United Nations agencies who are complicit, since the aerosol projects have happened in global scope, not just here in the United States. In fact, at a UN hearing, a woman by the name of Rosalind Peterson, president of the Agricultural Defense Coalition, reported on the effectiveness of aerosol programs around the world, and the fact that the issue was even discussed at the UN is unprecedented. They talked about it. All you have to do is find Rosalind Peterson, look her up on the internet, you will see her speech to the UN. It's compelling. They even talk about HAARP and how it's successful in doing what it needed to do, heating the ionosphere and steering storms to areas and removing them. The geoengineering process has already begun. How many people are aware of the drought that has been in California since 2012 by applause? By applause. How many people are aware that the global science, climate science people said that we would need at least 5 good winters of rainfall to eliminate this drought? How many remember that? How many know that the drought is done? It's over. And how many know how long it took for that drought to end? 5 months. This winter. You know what that tells me? Geoengineering. If the climate scientists told us that it was going to take at least 5 good winters to get rid of this drought, and it only took 5 months in one spring and winter drop, then somebody has been tinkering with the weather. Or climate change is nonsense. I'm willing to bet it's geoengineering that they're not telling you about. Yes?
Isn't drought so, okay, you say the drought's over, but it's not really because there's no groundwater. So that's why they have to have...
No, they have it. There's some places in California, no, that it's over. It's done. They have plenty of water.
Then why are they using the fracking water?
They're using the fracking water because it's cheap. They have to get rid of it somewhere. Where do you put it? When you take all that water and you're blasting it into rock, where does it go after you're done? It has to go back somewhere. So the petroleum companies sell it to orange growers and they let them use it for free. That was probably a couple weeks ago. They just announced that the drought is over. The National Weather Service, you can look it up, the drought across this country is done. In fact, it's 16% of normal. Why is that? Geoengineering.
But it seems like the drought was created to run the food supply down. And
Right. But now they're changing it for some reason. The whole thing is that yeah. What's that? Right. Right. I mean, look, we live in a time of disaster capitalism. It's all about disaster capitalism, okay? So whatever they can do to damage an area, they'll always rebuild. That's why wars are declared.
So flooding is on the agenda now for Florida?
Yeah, well, flooding is all over now. They're flooding everywhere. The South is all flooded out now. Florida, what?
Florida, I heard, was on fire.
Well, they've moved it then. But see, the thing is that the way they're moving the storms and arranging, it's like moving chess pieces. How many people saw the thunderstorm that was supposed to hit Portland being steered away from Portland with the chemtrails? A lot of people. If any of you saw this, I saw it. They did a crisscross in the sky and then they did a perimeter roll over it. The storm switched and went to the areas where why they didn't want damage done with the huge hails that hit Zigzag, Welch's, and Mount Hood. It was last Thursday. You do? Well, it's amazing, isn't it, the way that storm just luckily steered its way around Portland. And then they didn't plan on this other one coming from the other side, so they steered it over towards Beaverton. They wanted to avoid a disaster. Yes?
Do you think that with the drought ending seemingly on purpose in California, do you think that maybe the good guys, per se, have gotten control of these weather?
No. It's all ebb and flow. It's all for money. It's not good, guys. It's all profit.
What would their motive be for ending the drought?
To sell more bottled water.
Well, it's got to go somewhere, so it's going over now to the other side.
Was that the same storm that just hit Seattle or missed Seattle?
Yeah. It was the big thunderstorm of the year, and it hit over here. It was horrible over there. Portland got saved. And if you look in the sky, you'll see why. Because as it was moving in, trails were being sprayed, a round trail. It went X like this, and then it went around. It had a round thing. And I watched the storm just go around the trails. It was weird. Yes?
Yeah, I came from LA and we haven't had rain since, except for today, we haven't had rain since February, and it's just, I just believe it's still just LA's water wars. There's a big history of it. It seems every time it's predicted, I live along the mountain range and they come and they just follow the mountain and just...
Well, there are some areas of California that are still in drought.
And I
But the majority of the country that was drought-stricken no longer is drought-stricken. Yeah.
Families in Northern California and in San Luis, and it kind of comes there, and then just.
Yeah. I was really surprised. It made me like laugh out loud because I was saying, wow, climate scientists told me it would take 5 winters. And it's like, oh, but the science is in and we should not question. So we talked about cloverleaf. We talked about others. Here's something from the summer of 2016. This is very close, very, this is like last summer. The Environmental Protection Agency formally declared that emissions from jet engines endanger the health of humans and the environment. They have even acknowledged their part in geoengineering. You probably heard this before with the other speakers. The EPA is now investigating that possibility that lingering contrails, their title, contribute to dangerous heat waves, more powerful storms, lengthening of fire seasons, and other dangerous consequences. So the EPA is now looking into this. That's why we need to strike and say, hey, EPA, look what's going on. We see it too. Let's do something about it. But after the Global Sustainability Conference, which was the Global Sustainability 2030, all the climate science people, that was September of 2015, they addressed the so-called chemtrail controversy, saying that 98% of the consensus said there is no evidence of a massive spraying program happening all over the world. The climate science people said there's no evidence of a chemtrail conspiracy or a contrail conspiracy. Why? Because it would throw out their CO2 stories. If we were to state that water vapor and other chemicals are causing problems with the climate, it would immediately ruin their cap and trade and their taxing. We'd all be able to go around our little fossil fuel cars and destroy the planet. But see, that's the thing, is they think that if anybody questions climate science, we believe in crapping in our own homes. That's nonsense. People want to preserve the planet. That's why we're into chemtrail science in the first place. Yes? Yes?
I called the EPA over chemtrails, and they told me they have no jurisdiction over it. It's the FAA.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's called passing the buck. What?
Federal aviation, they mentioned spraying in the Midwest for Gulf, what is it, hailstorms.
Do you know who admits to it? NASA. NASA will tell you, yeah, we lay chemtrails. NASA's involved with all these studies about climate disruption due to chemtrails. And they state that there's lithium in the trails. They say lithium. That's only part, right? We know everything else, but they admit, well, yeah, we have lithium in our trails, and we use them to watch the winds change. And yeah, you know, it may cause problems for certain people because it's poisonous, but it's probably one in about 1 million people that are affected. So therefore, it's not really that big of a problem. Yeah, I was just going to tell you that Donald Trump's environmental regulations basically revealed that new research offers powerful evidence of a link between pollution and dementia, but they're dropping the program.
Bill Gates is funding it, so it's fine.
Yeah, well, he's funding a new vaccination push for zero population growth. Reproductive rights, and like, if people don't get their vaccinations in Africa, they give them a gunpoint. According to the study that was pulled, I managed to get that study before it had a chance to be pulled. And the cognitive effects of air pollution are dramatically more pronounced in women who carry a genetic variant known as ApoE4, which puts them at higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. Talk about your eugenics programs. It used to be that women were on the list of bottom feeders back in the days of eugenics. That's why they sterilized a lot of them. And now they're giving older women a chance to get dementia and Alzheimer's because of the air toxicity, and they're pulling funds. So, how much time am I doing? Am I doing all right here? About 10 minutes? So, some other things I wanted to share with you is that if you want to go back You can go back to 1915, when the proposals to control the weather first happened, when proposals of using aerosolized planes, biplanes, crops dusters were the beginning. And then if you look at the Smithsonian, they will tell you that as far back as 1946, they were putting carbon dioxide into the clouds and they created snowstorms. That's the beginning of the weather control. But you can go to GE's research laboratory, and they wanted to create the variables of the weather. And as the Cold War was heightened, weather control was seen by the United States as a potential weapon that could even be more devastating than nuclear warfare. Ho Chi Minh Trail flooded out because of weather control. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, they were seeding the clouds for fog because there was so much fog there they couldn't land their planes, so they would seed the clouds so they would snow. The Russians have their hands on weather control, which we cannot rule out that maybe some of these other trail situations are being carried out by Russian companies with Russian ideas to ruin the wheat crop so that they can have the wheat crop. Wheat crop sold to Europe, wheat crop sold to the United States. We have to get our wheat crop from Russia. If we have bad apples, we get them from Chile. It's all part of the business. The agribusiness is basically you ruin one field, you can make money off another field. Weather warfare. And we hear it's not happening, but it is. In December of 1950, Charleston Daily Mail in West Virginia ran a short article quoting Dr. Irving Langmuir, who said that he worked with Dr. Vincent J. Schaefer with the early experiments at GE Research Laboratory for controlling the weather. This is where it began. Dr. Edward Teller, the father of the H-bomb, testified in 1958 in front of the Senate Military Preparedness Subcommittee that he was more confident getting to the moon than changing the weather, but latter is a possibility. It's easier, probably, eventually we'll find a way to control the weather. He says, I wouldn't be surprised if we accomplished it in 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised if they had total control of the weather in the next 50. So now we know that the military plans to modify the weather for full spectrum control. Wanting to use the space fence, they want to use other means. HARP can heat up an area, push a storm, steer a storm, steering hurricanes. All of these things have been talked about, and they're probably already being implemented. I mean, the new study from Harvard is saying that once it's implemented, once their new program is implemented for the solar geoengineering, that people would be used to seeing a white sky rather than a blue one. And they compared them to the skies of France and China. We all know that Chinese skies are polluted with all kinds of toxins. That's why they have white skies. France, they're using a program of spraying that they're using simulants there as well. That's why their skies are white. There's also a periodical, or at least a study, that many people don't agree with, but they should look into. It's called Case Orange. You can write this down, look up Case Orange. Basically, they don't like calling them chemtrails. The reason why is because it's associated with conspiracy theorists. But they bring into account things like the Space Preservation Act of 2001, where Dennis Kucinich had talked about, it was the first environmental act that used the term chemtrails in order to eliminate them. But then it was such an uncomfortable word for them to have in a bill that they removed chemtrails from the bill. So they use the term persistent contrails to describe the phenomena, and they say all contrails are chemtrails, just like Raphael did. She was on my show and she said all contrails are chemtrails. And I never thought of it that way, but they are. So if anybody says, hey, that's a contrail, not a chemtrail, well, they all have chemicals and water vapor and all these things that make everything horrible for all of us. Case Orange, the reason why it's so controversial is because Case Orange believes that chemtrails are not misanthropic. They believe that they're for our own good. But they say they're there. And they're there for consumer reasons. It's consumer driven. But Case Orange is actually one of the most one of the biggest cases that has made awareness of the trails available to the government, although the government's still reviewing it. Case Orange presents evidence that Raytheon wants to control all the weather. which the authors find repugnant given that it is a private corporation. The authors recommend suing private corporations instead of governments, but subcontracting is quite common for governments and agencies, especially the military. I agree with that. Many times when we listen to radio shows like mine and others, the first thing we say is, damn the government, they're screwing us with this. Damn the government, they're screwing us with that. Well, guess what, guys? The government is only subcontracting. It's private companies that are screwing us. That is weather fascism. If the government is subcontracting, if the government is subcontracting companies to basically fill the skies with toxins, there's plausible deniability and lack of liability and transparency from your government. If we hide it in business models, no one's going to want to investigate the businesses because there are laws that say that businesses cannot reveal their secrets. That's why the 11 herbs and spices in your Kentucky Fried Chicken are still a secret. So the same laws that protect Kentucky Fried Chicken and Coca-Cola are the same laws that protect these companies from toxifying you. And argumentally, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Coca-Cola toxifies you. I'm the colonel, and I'm making you sick. So you're looking at articles all over now that are surfacing about anthropogenic climate change, which claim that the average person is responsible for the majority of changing the state of Earth's life support systems and climate. According to these articles, humanity has decimated the planet in countless ways, and the repercussions are becoming catastrophic. Now, the answer to all this, then, is to do more damage with geoengineering. Doesn't make any sense. It's because it's all about plausible deniability. When you're using environmental situations and you're changing the environment oh so slightly, when you're dinking around with weather oh so slightly, when you're doing things to piss people off oh so slightly, they can always back off and say, we didn't do it. You gave us consent to do it. It's for national security. What we need to stop doing is giving consent. Yeah. What?
How do we do that? Stop giving them our consent. How?
Stop paying them money. Stop paying their money. You vote with your dollar, and I tell that to people all the time. You vote with your dollar. Whatever you're putting your money into is giving them consent to do more. If you support certain things, that's where you should put your money towards. That means if you want more information, find the authors that have the information, buy their books, do research, give them credit, share. Tell people about where you hear things. Because, you know, the thing is, money keeps things going. And it's sad, but true. And when people say, oh, you're a sellout for saying this, well, no, because I have to pay my bills. They have to pay bills, and all the hard work that they do means you don't have to do that hard work. You can get the information, and if you want to research it yourself and find your own abilities, then fine. But we give consent to every 4 years lowering the bar of morality so that some bastard can take over this country and screw us all. And that's the thing. That's what they call a pathocracy. That's what they call ponerism. When we lower the bar each time to excuse immorality in this country. You know, Donald Trump said something right when he was running for president. You know what he said? He said, I can kill somebody in the streets of New York and I'd still be popular. Politics is a football game. It's not a football game. It's like Alien versus Predator. One will win, but we all lose. Because they all like humans, they're tasty, and they make good food. Yes?
Are you advocating the George Carlin approach, just don't register?
I love George Carlin, but I don't take a political stand. Because that would make me someone who is not an objective reporter, and that's what I like to be. But I do see what I would call injustices being carried out, and we just let it happen because we're afraid, we don't know what to do, we don't know how to do it. But you know what? Knowledge empowers you. Every bit of knowledge you take from this chemtrail summit will empower you. Anyone who tells you it's nonsense will empower. You can tell them, I'm empowered because I have the notes, I have the things. One guy, some guy told me that I was some orange deplorable because I said what I said about climate change. And when I gave him the document, he says, I'm military, I know what I'm talking about. I says, okay, have you read your document called Owning the Weather by 2020, 2025? Well, no. I said it to him. He goes, oh my God, I didn't know. All right then, so why don't you take back that I'm some orange deplorable? They won't do that because you're basically showing them that they're caught up in their own. And I told the guy, I says, oh, I see, so you're already into the political nature of climate science. It's all politics, isn't it, to you? If I say I don't believe in climate change, I'm an idiot because climate changes all the time. But if I say that I don't believe in the politics involved, then that gets you right where you live, because that's all what it's about, huh? If you don't believe in climate science, you must be a stupid Republican. If I believe in, I'm a good Democrat. I'm a good liberal. Bullshit. You know what? It has nothing to do with whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's life. It has nothing to do if you're a red state or blue state. It's the state versus you. Whichever you want to use. Doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, we got questions. Let me get his question, I'll get all your questions.
Yeah, I was wondering if that whether or not a country is part of the NATO alliance has anything to do with chemtrails.
I don't know. I would.
Originally, NATO countries were the first ones to complain about it.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. If they give I think they complain, and then if they give the kiss of billions of dollars to keep quiet, they don't care. Next question. Anyone? I saw a question over here. You? Or were you stretching? Gosh, I saw a bunch of hands go up over here. Now nobody wants to talk.
I'll give it a shot. I'm not a public speaker, but I'll give it a shot. So what first comes to mind is thousands of people went to work for years every day, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they built the atomic bomb. What if we're all being blindsided by this whole weather modification, whatever we want to call it, and it's a bigger thing because we are the environment, and it's our frequencies are changing. It's us.
I just did a show a while back. You know, how many people have heard of the Mandela effect? Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out what this Mandela effect is, but I did after the alleged death of Prince Philip, which didn't happen, which everybody said, you're fake news because you said it happened. No, I said a bunch of French agencies said it happened. The French also reported Princess Diana's death. I didn't believe that until I found out for truth. But Prince Philip was reported dead back in 2011. And if you look around everything on the internet, it said he had a heart attack in 2011, and they put stents in his body and kept him alive. Okay? Billy Graham died in 2011 too. But last time I checked, he's still heart beating in North Carolina, or South Carolina. Kirk Douglas died?
Well, that's what they said.
Well, yeah, he's now pushing, what, he's 101 now? Yeah. So what I figured, Kim Jong-un died of a heart attack in 2011. Muammar Gaddafi died in 2011. And Osama bin Laden died in 2011. Yeah, really? Yeah, several times, 11 times. What I'm figuring out here is that in 2011, after Fukushima blew, and we had all these earthquakes that happened, the actual precession of the planet changed about 8 feet, which was enough to cause a wobble in the magnetic field, which is enough to make us all go, wait a minute, our brains are reacting to this. Everything that we thought was in one timeline has moved to another timeline, because we lost a few seconds of time. And when it happened, there were 2 things that happened I thought was interesting in 2011. One, astronomers voted to put 13 houses in the zodiac. And many of us don't even know that. Ophiuchus is the 13th house in the zodiac. Many of us are not the same sign as we were back in 2011. I'm now an Aquarius. I used to be a Pisces. Now I'm feeling much better about myself. Now I don't have to cry in chick flicks anymore. I can say, screw the chick flicks, I'm going to go see Guardians of the Galaxy. What the hell is this Notebook movie? I'm going to go see a science fiction film. But they changed that, and then the weights and measures people decided to get together and eliminate leap seconds from our clocks to basically make time. They also considered bringing back the 13-month year.
How can they do that without
28 days. Something happened in 2011 that most people don't know about. I talked about it on my show. Did you know that Samoa, American Samoa, lost a day in 2011? It was at the end of the year. They lost Friday, December 30th, because they moved the international dateline for actual procession. Because the dateline was off, they had to move it. So if all that time problem was happening in 2011, guess what else fired just before that? CERN. Fukushima, CERN. Most of the most powerful nuclear, one's not a disaster, allegedly, and the other one is a disaster. So now you wonder why you're having these Mandela effects. Now you wonder why you think you're confused and having deja vu. It's because your timeline was screwed because of earthquakes, manipulations with particle physics, and a huge explosion in Japan.
How about if you were born on a leap year, 29th of February? Kind of screwed as well.
Yeah. I just want to know where that day went in Samoa. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you're aware of the Geoprism project that was happening on Mount St. Helens, and I think it still is. They were mapping, supposedly they were mapping the lava domes by setting off up to 60, drilling into the active volcano, 60 individual, 2,000, up to 1 to 2,000 pounds of charge to map these lava domes.
I think I heard some about that a long time ago.
I actually did it because I'm a hunter. And it was in a little newspaper about the consent thing. A little dinky newspaper that's out of business now. And I caught it because I was up there hunting, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I called the Forest Service, leave a comment, and I wanted to know the exact...
Well, not only chemtrails, but in the whole, this whole matrix of domination. But the fear that seems to be targeting us right now is not only weather events out of our control, but collapse of the economy. And when you project forward, it's really hard to kind of see anything beyond this apparent collapse of the fiat currency and switch over. And there was some little, it was weird, a little ray of hope about, well, maybe they'll just defund all those sprint programs. But because this matrix is so enormous and because it is run by Raytheon and really have co-opted our government, the contractors to the military, which I've seen up close and personal, and I just kind of wonder how people are seeing the future for themselves with this currency collapse.
It's hard enough.
Environmental collapse.
It's hard enough to plan 6 months ahead, let alone 10 years.
Right.
That's the way they put it now. We don't know. It's like every day is a new day, and every day that we're breathing and safe is a miracle. We don't know. That's why we have to be prepared at all times, be vigilant, and be aware, and talk. The dialogue needs to continue. I always say on my program that it's dialogue I'm looking after. I'm not here to preach to you. I want dialogue. Because you know what? Talk radio today lacks dialogue. So many times you're hearing from conservative talk show hosts that are telling you how to think. I'm a talk show host that tells you, damn it, think. And talk to me. Don't be rude. Otherwise, I'll be an asshole to you. I don't care. And I do that, believe it or not. People say, oh, you have disdain for your listeners. No, I have disdain for rude ass clowns, actually. They can go ride their unicycles and play with their little horns elsewhere. Balloon animals are also fun, but not on my show. You had a question.
It was about the EMP stuff, the New York, LA, the outages that were like last week.
Gotham Shield?
Yes, Gotham Shield.
Yes. Basically, they ran the drills. We had power outages all over the country, and they weren't reported. We had the 3 major ones. We had a subway in New York. We had LAX. So they did 2 transportation hubs, and they did San Francisco, a major population hub. What's that? Yeah, Bart. Yeah, Bart was out. Yeah. Yeah, so they did do the drill. They did everything sparsely. The mainstream media downplayed it for the tax reform. I looked like an idiot. Because I told everybody, I said, April 26th, things are happening. And they did. We had missiles being loft off. We had the missile system set up in Japan for North Korea. We had the president meeting with the Senate. We had all these things going on. And when the 26th happened, what was the major story of the day? tax reform. Oh, man, I'm so glad that you've decided to avoid talking about World War III for my taxes, because you're not going to get as much, or I'm not going to get as much. Look, if they drop a bomb on me, I don't give a shit what I get. I don't care. Huh? Yeah, I'll go back to my horse and plow. I'm on the radio Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. to midnight Pacific time. They basically milk 5 hours out of me every night. I enjoy it. I do 5 hours of research before I do my program, so it's well researched. We have great guests. I have a great producer named Ron Patton. I publish a few books at thegroundzerobookstore.com. I have things out there for sale, T-shirts, all kinds of other cool things. It helps the show. I would invite you to listen to my program. I'm also on 300 stations across the country. I'm second only to Coast AM. In fact, I'm an opening act for George in most markets. I'm more of a rock and roll kind of guy rather than a guy who plays ABBA. So if you don't mind a little Black Sabbath, Kiss, and Alice Cooper, you'll love my show. I thank you for this opportunity to speak here today. I find it great that we're talking about this. As I say, dialogue is great. You can't be an innocent bystander by standing. You have to speak or you're accepting it all. Thank you so much. Love you, Clyde. Thank you.